Oh. All right, welcome to the June 14th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. I am Jamie Finch and I'll be your chair tonight. Due to the hybrid nature of this meeting, we will have some members attending in person and others by computer or phone. For those attending remotely, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. If you have a desire to speak, actually the teams, what's the raise your hand that we want to use?
Yes.
Yeah, please raise your hand and Stacy and I will do our best. But if you are not getting called on, you might just have to pop in. We're usually pretty good though. So, and then anyone that is in person, as we typically do, but for new members, if you have a desire to speak, just tilt your name tag over like this, and then we will take questions. Some presenters take questions right during the presentation. Some will wait until the end. So we'll usually try to get that squared away before we start a section. When we have certain topics that are going to council, we will try to summarize agreement or kind of summarize the discussion, and then we'll have that basically presented to the board as a summary that you guys can amend. My summary is not sufficient. I think with that, Stacy, if you want to take us through our attendance.
Tom Anderson.
Here.
Nancy Davidson. Here. Jamie Finch.
Here.
Raj Gopandi.
Here.
Ashwin Khan.
Here.
Ashwin Manoharan. Don McWilliams has an excused absence. Ann Newcomb. Here. Janet Wall.
Here.
Dixie Bear. Here. And Alex D. Tinger.
Here.
All right. With that, we will go to the minutes. Do we have any comments on the minutes that were in our packets? Hearing none, those are approved by unanimous consent. Stacy, do we have anyone signed up to speak? Public comments?
No, we did not receive any written comments and no interest from our member of the public in speaking.
All right, with that, we will move into our agenda items. And the next one is an exciting one, which is welcoming our new members. We have Alex and Dixie. We'll go around the room, and I think when you guys go, just maybe a little bit more background. I think for us, what will maybe current board members and city staff, maybe name and your favorite like natural environment item in the city of Issaquah. Mine is, for example, I'll go first. My name is Jamie Finch. The big tree is my favorite thing in the environment of Issaquah. So maybe we'll start with Stacy and then go around, and then for Dixie and Alex, if you guys could just share a little bit about your short synopsis of your background and what has you excited about joining the board.
Stacy Van McKinstry, the city's sustainability manager, and then staff liaison to the environmental board. Really my favorite is, we call it the Indiana Jones Trail out on Tiger. It's the one that has the big talus rocks and the moss and the caves. So that area structure on the border of it.
David Reedy, I'm sustainability coordinator, and all working here, I'll say just the bike path that's right by City Hall. It's a great 15-minute break from work if I need to just think about things. So.
Thanks. I'm Ann Newcomb. I've been on the board since the beginning, and there's so many amazing places in Issaquah. It's hard to choose, but lately I've been really attached to Birdston Park. We adopted it, so I'm the forest steward there. The Issaquah Trails Club adopted it, so we've been getting real connected with it. It's a beautiful park.
Joy Lewis, and I would hearken to Bluey and my 5-year-old to say the creek is beautiful. Yes.
Dixie Bear, and this stuff I realize I don't get out much. I would just say action reviews. So just even looking around, I think we just have beautiful scenery. a little bit about me. I own Small Threads for Kids in Issaquah. We've been open for almost 15 years. I have 3 other locations as well. So my whole life is about sustainability and hopefully teaching other people to participate in the process. I'm excited to be here because I like to always tell people, if you want to make a change, you gotta do something, and we do that every day, but like I've never really done it in this capacity. So I'm excited to, kind of learn more about behind the scenes and how things work on the backside to really make some change. So thanks for having me.
I'm Nancy Davidson, and the thing I like best, I'll have to copy Joy. I love the creeks and the rivers.
I'm Janet Wall. I was on the River and Streams Board before this, and there are so many things I like about the Issaquah area. It's hard to choose. Yeah, I guess I like Issaquah Creek as well.
I'm Tom Anderson. I've been on the environmental board since the beginning. And one of my favorite little spots is Ruth's Cove on the Tiger Mountain Trail on Tiger Mountain.
Okay, I'm a visitor to Shagizer City Clerk. I love that I can be on a trail from a short 5-minute walk from City Hall. Pretty awesome.
I am also a visitor. I'm John Larson, friend. I'm the Transportation Program Coordinator at the city. I have to kind of mirror David, I think. I really love the Rails to Trails path that we have. I was at Public Works last week and they had like the old original plot map out. And there's the railroad right through there. So it was really cool. Anyway.
I will move to remote.
Alex, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. My name is Alex Tigner. I am the coordinator for the Lake Sammamish Urban Wildlife Refuge Partnership, and I'm employed by Trout Unlimited. So I work with a number of different conservation organizations in the area to encourage folks to care for the Lake Sammamish watershed through stewardship and conservation efforts. And my background's in biology and marine biology and environmental education. So hopefully you'll get to see me around at events throughout the watershed here, doing trash cleanups and plantings and things like that. And I think I have to say that Lake Sammamish is probably my favorite outdoor natural area, and especially Tibbetts Creek in Lake Sammamish State Park, as we're doing some habitat restoration projects there. So really getting to spend some time in the state park and enjoy the beautiful lake that we have.
Raj?
Hi, I'm Praj. I recently joined the environmental board. This is my second meeting. And I have lived in Issaquah, Sammamish area for close to 15, 16 years now. And I like everybody said, just the trails and the preserves, and I just like it. You can just walk out in 5 minutes and get to any trails. My favorite trail is Rainier Trail. It's short and you can choose to go further or not. That's pretty much it.
Ashwin?
My name is Ashwin. This is my second meeting in the environmental board, and my favorite environmental parts of Issaquah are definitely the hiking trails and Lake Sammamish.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to Alex and Dixie. I think with that, we will move to the next agenda item, open government training, which I think Tisha will be taking us through.
Tisha, the slides were maybe a little slow earlier, so just.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. Let's turn my video on. All right, well, hello, everyone, especially to the new members. The returning members know me well because this is a training that we offer our advisory boards every year. So thank you, returning members, for bearing with me. I'll try and be quick and get this done in about 10 minutes here. But I am the city clerk in Issaquah, and one of my responsibilities is to ensure that our city council and board and commission members receive open government training. This is a requirement under Washington state law to receive some information on 2 particular state laws that apply to volunteers on our advisory boards. So I will be going through quickly the Open Public Meetings Act and the Public Records Act. And new members, please, or returning members, please feel free to interrupt with any questions. So the reason we do this training is to give you some knowledge about how government works and some potential impacts or experiences you'll have as an advisory board member, and to reduce litigation risk and potential litigation, and decrease the opportunity for violations of either of these acts. So we'll start with the Open Public Meetings Act. So it means what the name implies, and that is that all of the meetings of the environmental board need to be open to the public. This means that in our physical space, we need to have an open door. In the virtual space, we publish the meeting passwords and links so the public can join virtually or attend in person. This means for your tours of the Recology and Cedar Grove facilities that we will accommodate the public on those tours if they choose to attend, because a quorum of your board will potentially be there. And anytime a quorum of you, for a 9-member board, your quorum is 5, are together and talking about city business, that is considered a meeting. So we'll talk about a few things to just be aware of in that regard. But we work hard to make sure the public knows about your meetings and knows where to be and has open access to them. You will occasionally have special meetings. Again, under state law, your special meetings are meetings that are held outside of your regular published schedule. And something to know about special meetings is that when you have a special meeting, you're limited to discussing items on the published agenda. So at a regular meeting, conceivably, someone could bring up a new agenda item, and that would be appropriate if there was a majority of the board that agreed to discuss that item, but that is not okay at a special meeting. I think the idea is that the public needs to be aware and have maximum opportunities to attend your meetings and hear the discussion. And so they're more likely to be aware of your published regular monthly meetings. And then I'm sure you're all aware of your regular meeting schedule, which is the second Wednesday, 6:30 here at Tibbetts Manor. So we're also required to publish an agenda for your meetings. We are required to publish and distribute those 24 hours in advance, but I know Stacy works hard to get you your agenda materials much further in advance of that so that you have some time to digest the material and come prepared. And that's a goal we have across all our advisory boards. The public is always welcome to the meetings. Public comment isn't mandatory, but it's something we encourage at all our board meetings, and it's a standing item on your agenda, which is great. Just one comment, there are some exceptions to having these open meetings. These exceptions are most typical by our city council, but if there's a need to discuss something of a highly sensitive nature, like potential litigation or the purchase of a property or a collective bargaining agreement, then those are some reasons that the meeting can be closed to the public. But again, it's not likely to occur at your board meetings. So there's really 2 things that I want you to think about. Let me make sure I'm not jumping ahead. Yes, I am jumping ahead. So your quorum is the number of members you need to have a meeting. So it's important for your meeting to start. There need to be 5 of you present. And if some regular members are not in attendance, the alternate members can fill in for them. If you are traveling or having a social gathering outside of a meeting where 5 or more of you want to be, that is fine. But when you're in those situations, just avoid talking about, which I'm sure is really hard, and avoid talking about environmental issues that relate to the city of Issaquah, which is hard, right? Because you all share a common passion there. But that is the rule of thumb. The idea is the public should be able to be present anytime you're talking about things related to your role on the board. All right, so these are the 2 things I want to touch on, the serial meeting, and actually I'm going to touch on one other situation that can arise that could be a violation of this Open Meetings Act. So one is the serial meeting, and this This was a new concept to me when I started working at the city, but there has been some case law around this. And the idea is that we don't want 5 of you meeting outside of a meeting to discuss environmental issues related to the city. We also don't want a string of you to be discussing environmental issues relating to the city outside of a meeting. So what this looks like is if maybe one of you emails another member expressing an opinion about a current or upcoming agenda item, and that email gets forwarded to 1 or 2 other members who might add their perspective, which then gets forwarded to a 4th and 5th member. So you have this email that sort of contains the input of 5 board members, and that could be considered a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act because there are 5 of you discussing in writing a particular policy issue. So with email, we ask that you do not email opinions related to issues on your agenda. You save your opinions for the meetings. If you want to share some information with the board, we recommend you do that by emailing Stacy or David and having them disseminate that, and avoid replying all. The same situation can occur verbally by the phone, over the phone, where if you're discussing with other board members and then sharing their perspectives or yours with other members, and collectively there gets to be 5 ideas that are being talked about outside of a meeting. So if you want to pick 1 or 2 people on the board that you want to be connected with outside of the meeting to run things by, that is great. Just keep that number of people you're talking to less than 5. And we encourage you to save more substantive conversations for the meetings. And then the last situation I want to mention, which comes up sometimes with the environmental board, are local or regional events where environmental issues are being discussed. Our preference would be that you designate a few people to attend and report back rather than having 5 of you attend. However, if there's something particularly locally where it's just really important, and I think I feel like we've noticed something in the past. I'm struggling to recall the event, but if it's really important for the board to be there, we'll go ahead and notice it as a special meeting. Yeah.
So I would assume most of the people in this room go to Salmon Days.
Right. So we're more worried about smaller venues where you might be together and where there would be environmental policy issues discussed. That's where what we're more concerned about. So if there was a local like roundtable or discussion hosted by Highlands counselors or environmental group. Yes, that would be a situation. We'd prefer that maybe you talk at your meeting and see if there's 2 or 3 of you going, great. If there's 5 of you that really want to go, let Stacy know, and we might go ahead and just notice that as a meeting to be kind of safe, that we've just provided notice that we expect 5 of you to be there. So, and you can always reach out if there's a particular event or meeting you're concerned about. All right, so there are some penalties for violations of this act, which are shown on this slide here. We as staff are working really hard to make sure you're on track here, but yes, is there a question? Raj.
Yeah, hi Tisha. So I have a quick question, and I know my video is frozen, so please ignore that. So if we have a follow-up email from, somebody who presented in the board meeting like last time or something, and if they are just providing some information or recap of their presentation and then asking for input because it's going to the city hall or somewhere else for more comment, and if I have any input on it, do I email to the entire, probably I thought maybe I should be emailing to the chair and Stacy, or does it need to be just Stacy I need to provide the input to?
I would say reply directly to Stacy.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion. I mean, again, the goal is to keep it away from 5 members, but we're also just trying to keep your discussion in this public space.
Okay.
Between each other as much as possible.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And Stacey, I assume you might choose to summarize to the chair what input you've gotten, but yeah, good question. All right, if there aren't any other questions, then I will touch on the Public Records Act. So most of the records that you get related to the environmental board will come from city staff, will be included in your agenda materials, or you might be sent some information by email. Anything that you're provided from the city, you don't need to worry about keeping. We are keeping the records. But we do want you to think about things you might be generating outside of city staff. And so what that could be, it might be some notes or something you're writing up to help you track your involvement with the board. If you're taking notes, you don't have to keep the notes. We're not obligated to keep them. We have a lot of requirements for our records as a government agency, but notes can be disposed of once they're no longer needed. So you are welcome and in some ways encouraged, if your notes have served their purpose, to go ahead and put them in the recycle bin. However, if you choose to keep notes or other records, keep them organized. If we get a public records request about an item that's come to your board, we may need to ask you for any records that you have that we don't have related to a particular meeting or agenda topic. So just know where they are and have them organized in case we need to ask you. Similar for email. So any email that is to the environmental board or includes city staff will have a copy of that email in our email archive. But if you're emailing directly with a member of the public or another board member and a city staff person isn't copied, there's a chance we might need to reach out to you and ask you for any emails that you have. So some board members do choose to have a separate email account just so they can keep everything real separate and clean. Another option is to generally include a city staff person on your email so that if you're asked, you can say any email I've sent in my capacity has included a city staff, then we'll know we have it. Another option is to have a folder, in your email inbox where you've put emails like that we might not have. So again, if we need to ask you, we can get them from you. So that's the main message here. Anything you're generating outside of the city, please keep it organized and understand that you may be asked to provide it in response to a request for records. We are obligated to provide records to anyone, anywhere who asks us for them as part of Washington State's open government laws, transparent government. So that is all I have on that topic. Lastly, we do have an ethics document that we like you to take a look at. It contains some information about what I've covered tonight and a few other things. I believe that Praj, you have already completed the acknowledgement form. So Dixie and Alex, I can email you a link to this form. You just read through, it's a few short pages, and then acknowledge that you've read through it. And we appreciate getting that from all of our volunteer board members. And with that, that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Tisha, any questions for Tisha? This is also a great time if you have any questions on Robert's rules. Tisha is the expert. All right, well, it seems like we are ready to move on. Thank you, Tisha. And next up on the agenda, we have the King County Metro Shuttle Program. John, will you be presenting that?
Yes.
Great, take it away.
Share my screen. Eternal words. Well, good evening. My name is John Larson-Friend. I'm the Transportation Program Coordinator. I'm also the liaison for the TAB, the Transportation Advisory Board. So I'm Stacy for them, basically. So I'm very familiar with this venue. I'm joined this evening by Meredith Sampson from King County Metro. Hey, there she is. And we're going to tell you about the MetroFlex on-demand service. The purpose tonight is just to introduce you to this program and answer any questions that you might have about it. Before I move on to Meredith's presentation from the Metro side, just wanted to note that first, I assume you read the memo, so I won't get into the history. I provide it there if you want to know a little bit more about how we got here. You might recognize this program effort by a different name. It's been called the Issaquah Shuttle for a while now. For about 10 years or so, the city has been interested in trying to reconnect the Squawk and Tallis neighborhood via some sort of transit option. It's pretty cut off from the rest of the city due to sidewalks, or lack of sidewalks, and SR 900 running a mile down from the transit station. So yeah, it's been a priority of council for a while. And in fact, in 2021, my position was created to try to bring something to those neighborhoods. So with that, I am excited to bring you the information on this potential partnership, and I will hand it over to Meredith to present.
Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. My name's Meredith Sampson. I'm a transportation planner at King County Metro, and I work in their service planning group with a focus on East King County. So I'm going to spend my time this evening talking about Metro Flex. On John. Thank you. A quick agenda here. I'm going to start with the role of on-demand services in Metro, move into an overview of Metro Flex, what it is, how it operates, where it operates. I'll talk about some environmental considerations of the service, and I will also touch on the workings of a partnership with Issaquah. So starting off with the role of on-demand services, Metro's flexible services are part of our broad range of mobility services, and the program started nearly 10 years ago. It's evolved over time, and we've worked with communities and tried new ideas and kind of adjusted our tactics based on lessons we've learned. So on-demand services are a type of service that Metro is offering right now that fit under that umbrella of flexible services. And along with other mobility options outside of what most people know Metro for, which is just the fixed route bus service. So the role of on-demand services is to provide mobility options in areas that don't have the infrastructure, population density, or land use to support high-capacity fixed route bus service, but where there's still an identified mobility gap for folks. The main priorities are to connect riders to fixed route transit, either through connecting people to bus stops, park and rides, or transit centers, and also to increase access to jobs and community assets locally within each service area as well. So for the last several years, Metro was operating on-demand services through a couple different vendors. In March, we consolidated all on-demand services under one vendor. The service is called Metro Flex. Previously, you may have heard about Community Ride or Ride Pingo or Via to Transit, but they're all one now called Metro Flex for legibility kind of across the system, and we're very excited about that at Metro. So I wanted to spend just kind of a few minutes talking through how this service works. So the main premise is that people can use this service to travel from any point within a service area to any point within the same service area. Riders can request a ride on demand, either using the Metro Flex app, our call center, or through our website. They designate a start destination. Any user would designate a start destination and an end destination for their trip within the service area, and then they're given an ETA. Metro Flex's fleet or minivans, kind of shown on the right here. It also includes wheelchair accessible vehicles. So when a rider books a ride, if they're doing that through the app, they can designate in their profile whether or not they need a wheelchair accessible vehicle, and it'll remember that for future trips. And I believe the same goes for booking on the website or online. You still need a profile, so anytime you book a trip, it will remember that preference. There's also interpreter services available to request a ride. And one thing that I want to emphasize on here is that this service is the same fare as a bus. You can pay on board with an Orca card or a Transit Go ticket. You can pay through the app with a credit card. We're not accepting cash at this time, but you can also load Orca cards with cash at certain locations if that is preferable. We're really trying to get an Orca card in everyone's hands. And so riders, I believe the cutoff age is 13 and older can ride alone in these vehicles. And Metro has the free youth fare right now. So since this is the same fare as a bus, really youth riders can get this service for free. Thank you. Okay, so here's a map of all of the current service areas. There are currently 7, and this table is kind of formatted a little strangely, so I apologize for that, but there are Juanita, Sammamish, Kent, Othello, Rainier Beach / Skyway, Renton Highlands, and Tequila. So as you know, King County is very large area-wise, huge mix of different densities, land uses. And so these services really vary from more urban land uses to lower density suburban land uses. So the service areas that are in more urban areas like Othello or Tukwila help to connect people to the light rail. And the service areas that are in lower density areas help provide local mobility to assets within the service area and connect riders to the transportation network, as well to like through park and rides and transit centers. So putting these service areas in different settings like this is really helping Metro learn a lot about service area design, and how big or small service areas should be for efficiency, and just where this type of service really makes sense and helps people the most. Okay, so I won't spend too much time on this slide, but this is what the MetroFlex app looks like. So you create an account, you book a ride, it provides you with an ETA. It's a very similar interface to other rideshare apps you may have seen or used before. You enter your pickup and drop off locations, and you can track your driver's progress along the way. Average ETAs right now are about 15 minutes. They vary a little bit across service areas, and we're working that out, but they average about 15 minutes. And depending on demand and who else is requesting a ride and where they're going, the algorithm will consolidate rides where it makes sense. So your vehicle may pick others up along the way or drop them off along the way to your destination. So it could be more of like a carpool situation. It's not like a single occupancy vehicle strictly service. Okay, this is where it gets a little tricky, a little complicated. One feature of this service is that it's integrated with Metro's bus network. So we want this service to really complement and not cannibalize fixed route transit. So within the app, you can also see transit options, and we've begun using this fixed route filtering. So what that means is that if someone requests a ride that has quote unquote good fixed route option instead, the user will be given directions to catch that. And how we define good was a very long conversation, but what we ended up with is a quarter mile or less of walking. The ride also has to end within a 15-minute ETA of when the user would get there using MetroFlex instead, and no transfers, so only a one-leg trip. So if all of those criteria are met, like you happen to be requesting a ride, you're standing next to a bus stop and a bus is coming and it'll take you right to your destination, you will see what you see on the right side of the screen, which is this notice. Says like, hey, your trip is better served by a bus. You won't see a MetroFlex option. Click plan my trip for directions and it'll direct you how to catch the bus there. Another point on this slide that I wanted to talk about is this corner-to-corner service idea. So this is a feature of MetroFlex that helps to increase driver efficiency. So when someone requests a ride, the interface will direct them to a pickup location that is nearby and usually on the corner of the nearest cross street. We call these virtual bus stops. I wouldn't show a map of a virtual bus stop right now because there's so many of them. They're just, pretty much every intersection possible across the service area is a virtual bus stop. But the main premise of it is that no one would ever be like our maximum walk shed that you would have to walk would be 250 feet, but the average is far lower than that. Most people are not being asked to walk more than 70 feet. And if a user marks in their Metro profile that they have the mobility concern, this overrides a virtual bus stop situation and you'll be picked up at your door. Okay, so for environmental considerations, I thought I would just touch on this since I'm talking to the environmental board right now. Metro is currently working toward electrifying both its fixed route fleet and flexible service vehicles. Majority of the MetroFlex vans are hybrid currently, but eventually they will all be. One thing that I just briefly touched on about the service is that MetroFlex provides these shared rides to maximize efficiency and decrease environmental impact. So if several people are requesting rides at the same time, the algorithm will combine the rides when it's possible, as long as the rider does not experience a route deviation that will take 1.5 times as long as the original trip. So we're not going to have someone request a ride and then be in there for like 3 hours as the van goes and drops people off and picks people up. But when it makes sense, it will consolidate those trips. And I also did touch on the service area design a little earlier, but the boundaries are drawn with the main intention to connect riders to transit hubs. So the idea is that riders are taking short trips within the service area to connect to the greater transit network and be able to take transportation, public transit elsewhere instead of driving the entire way.
Meredith?
Mm-hmm.
Question on that.
Yeah.
Can you share, and maybe you're just about to get there, Okay, never mind. Go ahead. I'm realizing that covering what I was going to ask about. So
Okay, yeah, I only have one slide left, but then I'm happy to take any and all questions. So finally, on to probably what you're all kind of wondering about. We have been working on and thinking about this Issaquah partnership for this service. So in 2019, you may remember, and John touched on it a little bit at the beginning, community engagement was conducted through a survey to the Squak and Taos neighborhoods to scope potential pilot to bring increased mobility to that area due to the nature of the topography and the infrastructure kind of making it difficult for people to walk and roll to transit from those areas. So, and also just the difficulty, like Metro can't operate transit in those steep, windy hills. Sorry, can you all hear me? Yeah, okay. So that didn't come to fruition due to COVID and budget impacts and whatnot, but findings from that survey did show a desire for residents in these neighborhoods to connect to transit hubs and local businesses. You know, they wanted mobility. So flash forward to 2023, and in talking with Issaquah City staff, we heard there was still a desire for this mobility option here, and serving these areas also ranked highly on Metro's prioritization model. So we looked into that and assessed where we heard people wanted to travel along with the transit hubs, and came up with this combined Sammamish Issaquah service area. So I showed in like one of the previous slides that the Sammamish area is existing. That area currently has about 2 vehicles operating within it during its service hours, and increasing the area, we would be adding 1 additional vehicle to accommodate the projected demand. Having a combined area allows for people traveling in these areas to have more destination options. It's really a benefit for Issaquah riders and Sammamish riders as well. And there's also an added efficiency in terms of just operationally that comes in with this in terms of vehicle sharing between the area, like expanding the area and having 3 vehicles so that they can go where the demand is greatest within the zone, versus doing an Issaquah separate zone, because that would need, they never start a new zone with only 1 vehicle, so it would need its own 2 vehicles, and that might be too much. So I think this 3 vehicles for the shared zone is going to be a sweet spot. So that's why we're here talking to you, and we're talking about this to the Transit Advisory Board in a couple of weeks. And we're really hoping this partnership can kind of fill a mobility need in the area, and help connect people to the places they want to go. And that is it, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
go ahead, Ann.
How many riders can fit in each van?
What was that?
Oh, how many riders?
Oh,
Each van?
that's a good question. I believe since they're minivans, they can take maximum of 5.
Thanks.
Right. Nancy, and then is that Praj that is got her hand up? We'll go. Nancy, you can go figure out.
I have 2 quick questions for you. I see you're only going halfway up in Sammamish. I know you're really focused on Issaquah, but I was just curious, why did you cut off Sammamish?
So that the Sammamish service area, John, can you go to the slide that has all of the service areas on it? Yes. So I know this is really small, but the Sammamish service area, I'm not sure what year was actually implemented, but it was a while ago, and it was implemented to account for some transit, like bus routes that were removed from the area for whatever reason. And I think it had the shape of the service area has to do with that. I was not working at Metro when that like service area was created. And we have heard requests from the city of Sammamish, like, you know, we want to go to these destinations up north and we want to do this. And it's really hard when we're looking at designing a service area, because you could just keep expanding it forever, because there's always going to be places that people want to go. So we thought in this instance, it made sense to expand south to include Issaquah instead of increasing the Sammamish service area to the north. This met some more of Metro's equity goals, I would say, than expanding the Sammamish area to the north. But of course, there's going to be destinations outside of there that, you know, that we would like to serve one day. Just maybe the service area would have to look a little different. To have to find that sweet spot of service area size to make the service really work.
I had one other question for you. How is this funded for Issaquah? Will Issaquah have to put something in its budget to pay for this?
Yes, so this service area, the proposal is for it to be funded for the one extra vehicle to be funded by the city of Issaquah.
Thank you.
Nancy, we'll go Praj and then Joy. Back over to him.
Yeah. Hi, Meredith. This is Praj. And so I had some specific questions. So is this program already in place? Do you already have vans working in these areas? Okay.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So then the next question was, and specifically because I know about Sammamish, and that's why I wanted to check, because I know there had been some issues with, low frequency and not beyond the peak times, not many buses available or buses available after 1 hour frequency or something like that. So I can see why this would really help for those transit issues. So my question was, does it help? I mean, this basically helps you take a metro or basically transit from one location to possibly a park and ride or something where you connect with the bus service. Is that right? Or is that the main intent?
So that is one way you can use the service, and we designed the service areas to try to include transit hubs like that, so someone could take it to the Issaquah Transit Center. However, those are not the only destinations. You can travel from any point to any point within the service area. You could take this to Fred Meyer, you could take this to your friend's house.
Okay, and so the pricing will be based on how many miles you are traveling, and it will be deducted from your ARCA card, or?
No, it's just the same price as if you're an adult bus fare. So I think that's $275.
Okay, for each leg, basically for each time.
Yes, for each ride.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that I will say that's just the general adult fare, but it matches whatever your ORCA card is. So if you're on an ORCA Lift or reduced fare program, it would match that.
Right.
And the free fares for kids as well.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Joy.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to your comment about how you were expanding the service area from Sammamish rather than heading north, heading into Issaquah. I was curious if you could speak a little bit about what you said ridership has been like, and if you find that there's been an increased demand versus just obviously our Issaquah needs, or if you found that maybe that there's not so much. I was hoping you could talk about ridership on the east side program.
Ridership in the Sammamish area currently?
Yes.
Yeah. So Sammamish actually this service area has seen it used to be operated by Community Ride before we consolidated all of the services into Metro Flex. And in the last few months, Sammamish ridership has really kind of blown up. We've had a huge demand for ridership here, which is why we think that expanding into Issaquah will be good. Like not too much we can't handle it, but like in a really good way. We're like, wow, this is succeeding. This is doing what we want it to do. And I don't have the exact ridership numbers right now trying to pull them up on my other screen, but that's too much for me right now.
So totally fine. That's what I was wondering. Like, right, is it going up? Is it going down? Right. So that's super helpful.
Going up, yeah.
Awesome. And then how are you guys evaluating when basically another vehicle or, when you're having for peak times especially, like how do you guys kind of figure that out as it's growing, and kind of how you guys touch base to figure out how this new service area is responding to the new services?
Yeah, great question. So we are constantly kind of looking at the data, and one key indicator that, maybe demand is rising, we need to increase vehicles and there's a lot of demand, is looking at the wait times. Wait times get well above 15 minutes, then we're looking, during certain times of the day, we need to look at potentially adding another vehicle. One nice thing about this model is that when we say add another vehicle, it's not necessarily adding a whole vehicle for an entire, like one vehicle always to the service area to be operating the entire length of the time that it's running. It's all kind of, it can be done on a smaller basis. So if we say, oh, there's a really high ridership from 4 to 6 p.m. in the Issaquah Sammamish area, like we need a fourth vehicle during those 2 hours, they can implement that and have another vehicle come to help with some of that demand during that time. So it's kind of a balance, but it really comes down to us just really monitoring the wait times and adjusting the vehicles in the area accordingly.
Do you mind if I ask a quick question just on that? when you say adjust a fourth vehicle, is that like contract with the city to add a fourth vehicle, or is this dynamically happening? Like-
No, that's dynamically happening.
Okay.
So the contract we're working on with Issaquah is like a set amount of, adding a third vehicle to this area for the operating hours, but anything beyond that is something between Metro and our contractor.
Okay, so 3 is the minimum, and then you guys flex to cover.
Yes.
My only other question was, I didn't notice a slide on planned community engagement to spread information about the routes. And I was curious, maybe like kind of using a model of what you guys have done in Sammamish, obviously, or if Sammamish was so long ago, then kind of how you guys were planning on being able to kind of roll this out in a way that was going to be able to reach the community successfully.
Also a great question. So we recently had a huge push from our communications and marketing team at Metro when we did this consolidation into Metro Flex, because it was a big change for a lot of people using the Sammamish service and all of the other services. There's a new app, there's, just new things to learn about that. So they have some really good marketing materials created on just how to use this service already that we'll be distributing through whatever avenues the city sees fit in terms of like, you guys know best how to outreach to your residents. So we'll definitely be using you for that. We will staff, if you have any like community events or open houses, we're happy to come staff those and talk about them. Any email blasts, that kind of thing, we're happy to do that. We also, when people show interest, they can sign up for like I forget what it's called, but just kind of these informational emails that'll come out and like help you use the app and give you updates. And I think even when you sign up for the app, you get a few rides free. So there's a lot of promotional material that also helps with people getting on board.
Great. If I can make a quick suggestion, if you guys don't already use QR codes at all existing bus terminals and things like that, so that current riders have that new information, it's a great way to be able to cut down on actual physical marketing materials.
Yes.
And to be able to use that digital medium. I really also wanted to encourage, I'm glad you guys are still using the old phone system, because obviously we know not everybody has access to technology, and being able to have this be distributed to the widest base of people is really appreciated.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether pickup and drop off at trailheads within the service area is allowed.
If there are trailheads within the service area, I would think that would be allowed. I don't know off the top of my head if there are or not. You would probably know better than me by looking at this map.
Yeah, there are.
So yes, I would say so, except I guess I shouldn't just say a blanket yes. It depends on the quality of the road and the vehicle being able to navigate it. But our intention is to be able to serve all of the areas within this service area.
Okay, thank you. Very good.
I guess an odd question. I can see this being a really great service. How does this though impact, does it take bus routes away over time? Because people are like, this is way more convenient. How do you not take away from the bus is so great because so many people can use it at once, which is great for the environment. How do you not take away from that and still create this for people? Like I have an employee who uses the service, and not this service, but the bus. His route just got eliminated. So I'm like, oh, this will be great for him. But his route is on a pretty main road. So I was kind of surprised it was eliminated. So I don't know if that makes sense. I'm just wondering how that affects the big picture of the bus situation.
Yeah, and that's a great question. This is a conversation I've had frequently at Metro. And we're putting these service areas in places that we're hoping people connect to the transit hubs. And I know Issaquah does have a couple local bus routes that run right through the service area. Looking at the ridership for those routes, not for those routes, for those stops specifically that are local stops that are not at a transit center, those ons and offs are very low. So we are going to be monitoring how this service impacts those, but we have no plans to remove bus service from Issaquah right now. We still are moving forward with the Eastlink network that will be implemented as soon as the Eastlink light rail stations open, but it is something to be like thinking about. And I also will just caveat that any of the bus, the recent metro reductions that happened, it wasn't a decision to, it wasn't say it like we weren't talking about let's remove bus routes and just fully replace them with Metroflex, because I think this is something that takes a very unique area to really work for. And so I think it will work for Issaquah based on the land use and density here, but it's not going to be something that we're just replacing bus service all across the county with Metroflex. I will also say this is a pilot program, so this is a 2-year pilot, and so we certainly would not remove bus service and then have this be a pilot and then remove a pilot. That's just, it's not in our game plan.
I'll also mention too that the routes that are going away, was it 215, 18, so somewhere around in there, that are going away in September, those were already planned to go away when Eastlink aligns. And it just happened to align with the driver shortage and having to consolidate that service. But yeah, great question.
Yeah, and I'm also happy to hear that this service will help them with that.
I have a question, then we'll go over to you, Ann. It's kind of related to Dixie's question. Is there anything, the original motivation for doing this is Talus and Squawk, right? Is there anything that is being, and maybe taking a step back from just Talus and Squawk, but is there anything that will be done, and this is maybe a question for Meredith, maybe more for you, John, to communicate more to the areas that we actually like really wanted to help serve better? Like, how are you guys thinking about like the areas that are poorly served by transit today being different, or maybe they aren't, and how we communicate?
Yeah, I can take that. So we'd already done a little bit of engagement around the topic. We did I think in April, we did a survey up in, well, Old Town was included too, since they were sort of included in the service area, but specifically Squawk and Talus. And we got a very large response, especially from Talus, and even high for Squawk, which was great. And basically the findings were, if something like this were available, I would take transit more. And I think it was like 50% of respondents said that. It was amazing. Plus the ones who already take it would take it anyway. We are currently working on a game plan for outreach. Obviously, Meredith, you mentioned that Metro will do everything they normally do to promote this service. But we also have an excellent communications team at the city that is ready to work with us on doing some targeted outreach and even mass outreach. And I've also talked to, I can't remember her name, Christy at Visit Issaquah, and she's also prepared to do some marketing for us as well, which is very exciting to hear. Christy, if you're listening, surprise, I've mentioned you.
Okay, yeah, I think that's just something that, in terms of helping mitigate unintended consequences of impacts on routes, the more focus goes on places that truly need the service, the better. Cool. And then, Ann, go ahead.
Is one of your goals to make it more possible to have a car-free society, even for people who live off the beaten path, like on hills?
Yes. Especially for a community like Squawk and Talus, which are very hilly. Talus has good sidewalks, but they're still on hills. Squawk obviously does not have a very robust sidewalk network at the moment. And of course, not being able to put fixed route buses up into these areas. This sort of service really fills in those gaps of the things that limit the ability to. I wish we could put buses everywhere, but that's just not the reality. Yeah. So things like this, these innovative sort of programs like Metroflex are an excellent kind of stopgap for that. Make sure that people have access to their community and access to the points in their community where they can go and explore the rest of the county.
Very cool. Thank you.
All right. Last call. Okay, I think, thank you, Meredith. Thank you, John. Appreciate you guys both joining us. And I think with that, we'll move on to our next agenda item, climate vulnerability assessment draft policies. Stacey, would you-
Can I ask a question before you get started, Stacy?
Yes.
So having reviewed this material, I'm concerned that, and I know you're going into climate change stuff, but we're an environmental board, so are we going to have the same kind of presentation on the environmental policies that are going in the comp plan? Just asking that just because I'm really concerned that we're missing that other piece of what we're intended to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember if you were here when Stephen came and presented to the board. It might have been the meeting that you missed, but the comprehensive plan is going to have a new element currently being called the environmental element. We may expand that title. So this board is going to be intimately involved in developing that, as well as the rest of the comprehensive plan will be open for those that want to look at different aspects of it, similar to what we did for Title 18.
That affects my comments as you go through.
Okay.
Because I was very concerned we were missing the environmental one.
Yes.
I think it was the one you were gone for.
Yeah, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
How do I comment on this?
That was the intro. Stephen provided intro. He'll be coming back multiple times. And one thing we discussed with the board as well as with the planning team is both about the board and council's involvement in that element, as well as with the climate resilience policies, which are a portion of those policies. And because we've been doing so much work on the climate vulnerability assessment and climate resiliency this last year, we thought we would review those policies separate at this time, but part of tonight's discussion was trying to keep it high level because there will be lots of iterations coming back. So,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just needed that context.
nope,
for myself.
and that's good for everyone and helps set the introduction. Okay. So tonight, because we have been through the vulnerability assessment, for those of you who were on the board last year, a couple of times, we're gonna just provide a quick refresher on what's been happening with the climate vulnerability assessment this last year. And then starting to look at proposed policies for the city's comprehensive plan update. As mentioned in the memo, we're trying to keep somewhat high level feedback tonight. We don't have a ton of time, and we will talk at the end about how we want to continue that review going forward. But we're trying to get those high level concerns, high level gaps, because there is going to be so much more work done on these policies as they start to integrate into the comprehensive plan through the summer. And also tonight, we're not looking for recommendations to council. This is kind of an initial feedback discussion on these draft policies. So just as a refresher, for the last year almost, we have been working on a climate vulnerability assessment. This was a near-term action within the ICAP. We worked with Cascadia Consulting, and they have been pulling together data, local, regional, national data. They've been working closely with city staff, also gaining community input through a number of different surveys and workshops and focus groups. They looked at climate projections as well as the likely impacts locally. They came to the board and we talked about sectors and subsectors. Those were also pulled out of various documents and the way that the city breaks apart those sectors for other planning documents. And then the consultant team has also been looking at exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity for each of those sectors and subsectors in order to get a sense of our overall vulnerability for climate impacts. So as a refresher, for those that have been on the board or to introduce for the new members, these are our sectors and subsectors that we've been working on. The main sectors being built environment, water resources, sewer, natural systems, and stormwater, public health, and community resilience. Been probably 9 months or so since the board provided the initial feedback on those sectors. So through the vulnerability assessment, the consultant team was looking at the impacts for the different climate risks across these sectors. So for example, increased wildfire risk is likely to impact our built environment, have some impact on our natural systems, public health and community well-being, where extreme rainfall and storm events are going to have impacts across most of our sectors. And then they've also been looking, as mentioned, the vulnerability of those various sectors. So what's the likelihood of these climate impacts and how resilient is that sector to be able to withstand them? Sectors that are likely to be more vulnerable to climate impacts are ones such as sensitive ecosystems and health and social services. Lower on the vulnerability scale were water supply, sewer, and septic systems. That's a lot in part to redundancy in the systems and infrastructure that we believe can withstand a lot of the projected impacts. So that's the about 2-minute snapshot review of the climate vulnerability assessment. We are currently working to finish up that report. We've gotten a lot of staff feedback that we're working to address, and then we have a new emergency manager that's joined our staff that is also going to be reviewing it and providing feedback before we finalize it. But that vulnerability assessment has been really important in helping informing a lot of the policies that we'll talk about next. So before jumping into the policy list, we wanted to just do a review of provide some context around House Bill 1181 that passed this year. It was under a different name last year. I'm blanking on the number, but this is the House bill that is going to require climate mitigation and resilience policies within comprehensive plans. So for Issaquah, we're actually not required to integrate with our current update to the comprehensive plan, but we have made a commitment to do so. We've already been building in actions from the climate action plan into the comprehensive plan, and now we want to build in more of the resilience element. So just to do provide a quick summary of what the requirements are under this House bill and what we intend to meet with our update this year is that the comprehensive plan must have policies that result in a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions generated by transportation and land use, must result in reduction in per capita vehicle miles traveled, prioritize reductions that benefit overburdened communities, identify, protect, and enhance natural systems, identify, protect, and enhance community resilience to climate change impacts, address natural hazards that are created or aggravated by climate change. And Commerce is, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but they're working on guidance that will support jurisdictions in addressing all 11 priority sectors that Department of Commerce has identified. So Commerce is not requiring jurisdictions to go alone at this. The state legislature tasked Commerce to work over multiple years to develop really detailed guidance for counties and cities to address climate change issues in their comprehensive plan. The guidance is focusing both on the mitigation side as well as on the resilience side. And it's also probably going to provide some additional requirements outside of the legislation. It's really providing a pathway for jurisdictions to undertake this work and meet the state requirements. Within the initial guidance that Commerce has released, they are requiring resilience goals and associated policies within these major priority sectors. These are those 11 sectors I mentioned. And these will all address those requirements under the state, the legislation that passed this spring. Okay, so next we're going to move into the proposed policies for Issaquah for consideration in the comprehensive plan. Before moving into discussions on those, just to give you a little background about how those policies were developed. So our consultant team has been working the last several months to start looking at policies that really came out of or were informed by the climate vulnerability assessment. And then they have been reviewing city planning documents, been leading workshops and focus groups and conducting interviews, meeting with staff to get feedback on initial policies. And that really helped to inform the initial draft list that they developed. And then they looked to crosswalk those draft policies with the work that Commerce was doing to provide on their guidance policies or suggested policies. And then the King County Cities Climate Collaborative was also working on some model policies to help jurisdictions address this requirement. So the consultant team's really been trying to crosswalk all those things, make sure our policies meet our need, but also align with state and regional model policies. So what we're looking for is some initial feedback on, are we on the right track? Are we getting it right? Are there things that we need to revisit and make changes so that we can continue the conversation among staff and make those revisions to the policies before we start vetting them further with council as part of the comprehensive update. Yeah, go ahead.
Question for you, and it's related to what Nancy asked. Will there be a separate session where we do something similar for like natural environment topics, wherever the non-climate environment topics?
Yeah, I think that's Stephen's intent. I'll peek at our schedule after this. I believe he's coming back in August and September to start talking about those policies. We haven't even started the conversation as staff yet to look at those environmental policies yet. So I think we have a kickoff meeting next week, I believe, to start that internally. So the consultant team also did look at how the proposed draft policies align with our current comprehensive plan and found some general alignment, strong in some areas, less strong in others. So that's where we're helping to try and supplement what's already in the comprehensive plan. I think in Issaquah, we have a really good start because we've already added in a lot of the policies from the climate action plan into the comprehensive plan. So I think we're ahead of many other jurisdictions. Great. So next we're going to jump into policies, the draft policies. And again, we're looking at across the different sectors, are we on the right track? What are any concerns you have about what's currently proposed? Are there major gaps? So that we can take that feedback, work to refine the policies and work through the comprehensive plan process. We don't have a lot of time tonight, so at the end of our time for this topic, we can talk about whether you would like us to take all the input, come back and do another review of the policies, or is there a particular sector that we want to dig into further, maybe built environment, that's where we have a lot of policies. So we can talk about that towards the end of our time about how we want to move forward. And then I think David printed out a couple copies of the memo. So that's where we've listed or provided the tables for the policies if folks want to review or refer to those as we go through the next few slides. I think Jamie can see folks on the screen. I will not be able to see you if you raise your hand because I have my PowerPoint up on the screen. So do feel free to jump in, or Jamie might be able to see your hands.
Right. Raj, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Hi, Stacy. So I have a couple of questions here. So I did look at the consultant, report or what they had provided. And so I just wanted to check, before deciding on, the basically climate vulnerability, was there any kind of climate mapping or, typically they'll do climate mapping or something like that. An associated question with that, the reason I'm asking is, was extreme heat not included as one of the hazards for the city, specifically Issaquah, because I don't think it was noted. And the second question I had associated with that was, how was the overall vulnerability, quantified for sectors and subsectors? Means I can see qualitatively, which sectors would be more vulnerable. I was wondering if there was a quantification method used to, justify that.
Yeah, for mapping, let me know if I don't touch on all of your questions. For mapping, we did look at a number of, there's a Washington Health Disparities map. We use some mapping done by the Climate Impacts Group that they've been doing around heat. There's a number of new wildfire maps. So we've been trying to look at the latest map at, one of the challenges is a lot of the climate mapping is done at the county scale. That's about as refined as it is. So we've been working with that data, but then also trying to interpret for our knowledge of Issaquah, as well as where we know there might be certain communities in Issaquah that might be at greater risk just because of roads or access to resources. And then extreme heat is considered as one of the major impacts and one of the major concerns for the community. So that is one that is captured within the vulnerability assessment and should show up in the policies, but that's a good item to raise if you're not seeing policies that strongly address extreme heat, knowing that that's something we're already dealing with and we'll deal with more. And then was it quantification of impacts for sectors? Is that what you
Right. Right. I was just curious, how was, that quantification, or how was that decided?
Yeah, I think, well, for the earlier slides where I showed kind of where the sector landed for resilience, some of that was done based on data, and then a lot of that was also based on staff input. So originally, probably this board saw several months ago, sewer and some of the water infrastructure maybe was more in the yellow in terms of risk. And in conversations with our public works team, they felt that actually we have very redundant systems, that our infrastructure could deal with major storm events. And so some of those shifted just based on that feedback from staff. So quantitative, but also qualitative, I'd say, based on staff expertise.
Okay.
Did I get all your
Right.
questions?
Right. Then I had just one quick question on, I did see the talking about GHG emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions reductions in few places. And I know the goal is to reduce. I was just wondering, and I'm not sure if you already have it in place or not yet, but was there any specific goal in mind, like, 50% reduction, 30% reductions, or going somewhere carbon neutral or anything? I'm just curious to see it. Or was it a general approach to reduce, or just apply the strategies?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Those are covered in the climate action plan, those specific goals and target years and baselines. So I don't know if those are called out in any of the memos that we provided to the board, but I can send you those specific targets. I don't know if they're called out specifically in the comprehensive plan, but we can check on that.
Okay, thank you.
The city does have those targets laid out in that.
Okay.
Any other general questions before launching into policy input?
We do have about 35 minutes left in this section. So think built environment, we can go a little bit longer, but in general, we're in the 4 or 5 minutes per. So please try to keep your comments concise and to the point.
Yeah, and one thing we did was group some of the sectors for this discussion.
Oh, okay.
Because so there's only about 4 slides, I think, because we could spend all evening probably on the build sector. So that's part of, if folks have a ton of comments on buildings, housing, energy, transportation, we want to stay there. We can do that for the next 30 minutes, and then we can come back and talk about the other sectors if you want. So completely open to where the conversation goes.
What's the temperature of everyone in terms of your like comments between built environment and everything else? And I know these two probably have a lot in built environment, but would love general heat map of comments. Is built environment the majority of what people have?
I think we should just get started.
Yeah.
My opinion, see where we go.
Can I try another tack real quick and to see something? I think that this is such an exciting document. As somebody who's been going over policy for years, I will tell you this is very needed, very good work, great place to start. And there's a huge discussion that needs to be had by this board that we don't have time for tonight. So the easiest way I could tell you is that I would love to see this again with more time. I would love for staff to say, take specific things and talk to us, whether we have a meeting, whether we have it over email. I think it's a very broad way for me to tell you, yes, we want to see it again. Yes, we want to be able to talk about more of a micro scale versus the macro we were asked for tonight. And that might be easier is to say, let's do a little more offline work and see this again, rather than trying to consolidate it, because there does seem to be a little bit of a time factor. So if that helps, that's another direction to go as well.
Love it. Yeah, it's very impressive. Great work that everybody's doing.
But I think there's a lot of room for being able to have a discussion that we don't currently have the availability to have tonight. And so being able to say, let's start this dialogue and then let's see where this next draft goes so that we can collaborate and then be able to say next draft and be able to have more time.
And Joy, and what you're saying, is that saying keep very high level comments, and if you have detailed comments, save them for later? Is that
With the
paraphrasing?
caveat that we're coming back.
Coming back.
It's all in the next draft kind
Yeah,
of.
just want to make sure
Yeah.
the application of what you're saying.
Yeah. If I don't know if that helps, but.
Nancy?
Well, I guess I wanted to start with the housing, building, and energy policies. And in just a general comment, it's a high level comment for you. It feels like single family homes or duplex, the majority of what you see in the city is not being hit very hard. And to achieve our climate objectives, we need to be talking and finding some way to incentivize people to put solar on their homes, to do other things. And most of this is directed toward business and low income, but clearly that is not what the city of Issaquah has the majority of its housing. And so I'm troubled that we are not going after the biggest bang for our buck, which is somehow finding a way to get residents to do something differently. And those policies have to come across clear, or we're never going to achieve our objectives. So my comments are high level, but we need more. It's not enough. Sorry.
Sometimes in different meetings, we have different ways of doing it, whether we do snaps or hand raises. I would like to second that comment. I think that we most certainly need to keep the policies in place that we have for a diversity of our population. However, we also need to acknowledge that there needs to be a path forward for people who may not hit the income thresholds that we're setting. And so then what do we do for other parts of our population to be able to bring them along? One thing that we always like to say at Planning Policy Commission is that the teeth is in the code, right? So the policies really guide that. So the work that we're doing now has a trickle down effect, right? So when we talk about the heat island effect and we see houses going up with no trees next to each other, when we write code, we can't do much about it, right? And so being able to call out very specific policies by this board to say, hey, this is how we mitigate it, because this is how we want to be able to do this. There's a lot of great suggestions, but to Nancy's point there seems to be a lot of room and a lot of movement that could happen on a policy level to be able to get us where we want to go when we're able to start saying, hey, how do we actually then implement this and our expectations of community members and developers?
I had a couple comments. One, I completely agree with Nancy on the single family homes and basically the move towards electrification being really absent in the comp plan. I think there's a bunch of ways that we could talk about how you go about it, but I think that as a topic area isn't covered. Fleet electrification also is not covered. One thing that the cross out of missing middle housing, I know it's as part of a bigger thing, like isn't addressed in Title 18 update. And then purchasing policy, and I don't know where purchasing policy goes. This is the biggest category, so I've thrown it in here. I think that's massively important how that comes out. And I think that should be a part of the comp plan, and it's, at least from my reading, not currently in there. So those would be the things that seem like they're missing that I'd love to discuss. So
What was the last one you mentioned?
purchasing policy, you should know it well, right?
Yep.
Great. Any other questions or comments on the sections that Stacy has up?
I lumped in transportation here, so.
Nancy?
Sorry. As we talk about transportation, as we all know, we all like to drive our cars. I drove one over here today, so I get it, you know. But, and I think the metro stuff that you were doing earlier, you may want to stay for this conversation. That's a higher priority, yes. But I just, you know, we are not really addressing the issue of people on their single family cars, not only in the city or those driving through the city, you know, to the south or to the north. You know, we now have a new transportation corridor through the Issaquah Highlands that goes down Issaquah Hobart Road. You know, we've got to find ways to deal with this in a different way. I appreciated that finally we're talking about bike share and scooter share in the city, because many of us could get around town a lot easier on something like that than you know, driving cars. But I think we're looking at ourselves, and transportation is not just us, it's also those people commuting through this community. And I think we need to be looking at that as well.
Go ahead, Em.
So I liked seeing that in the plan, you want to motivate businesses to, you know, have shuttles and continue or go back to telecommuting. I think it's really important that the large businesses in this area, especially the tech businesses, understand that that while they're currently trying to get people to go back into the office and demanding in some cases, like with Amazon, people go back to the office, that trickles out to the rest of the community, and it makes it so they can't meet their climate goals, but then the cities and the county and the state also can't meet their climate goals because people are getting in their cars, and even if they drive to transit, they're clogging up the streets and you know, releasing greenhouse gases rather than just being productive and happy and getting to stay at home and work.
Thanks to follow up to that.
Well,
Is that
I
like an
think-
encouragement?
So,
to
yeah, I think it's good. I saw that is something that is in there, but like if it could even start happening now, because there are businesses forcing people to go back to work and why, and so I think if we could reach out to the city, any of those businesses that we have in the city and just say, have a conversation about it, that would be really beneficial. If there are any, maybe they're all downtown. Okay, good.
Yes. I think there's also, I don't know how to do this, but having just coming back from Europe, you see a lot of traffic circles, and you see them built all across the state of Washington to reduce the amount of time cars are spent idling in intersections. And so it's a structural fix to a problem, but if we're going to, it makes the air pollution less. It reduces the use of, carbon-based, fuels. So we need to start thinking about how we design our intersections in a different way. And there's probably a policy in there, to look at ways to reduce the amount of infrastructure that's stopped at stoplights, or better infrastructure as we're redesigning Newport Way, put in traffic circles to get people around. We're just redesigning these roads. We need to think about transportation differently.
Yes, to piggyback on that, to give an example of why I think there's a larger discussion to be had about the built environment, what Anne and Nancy are talking about really goes to the heart of how we plan to build our communities, right? There's a very vested interest in having people return to work in Lake Union because two particular landowners own most of it, built the environment to service one particular need. And when obviously the pandemic impacted that, then there was a collapse of the area, right? So when we look at the fact that Old Town is a food desert and people have to get into a vehicle to be able to do the most basic things for their life, how do we change and have an impact of saying this is important to us, right? Like food security is called out in this document. How do we actually have these policies that support this so that we can create code that says this is how we can do this rather than having massive 10,000 square foot grocery stores allowed everywhere? How do we be able to have food in all places of our community without having these disparities of square footage in our code, right? So there's a very real impact of these policies of our built environment, and how do we have each unique neighborhood in Issaquah keep their character and be able to have you stay in your neighborhood and be able to go get a cup of coffee, to meet with friends, to be able to have the services that you need on your day-to-day basis without having to get into a car. And that is directly tied to code, right? That's how we do that. And so I think that these are great examples of what I'm saying, of why there's these larger discussions to be had about how we do it on a policy level, right? To be able to get to these larger goals.
Anything else on buildings, energy, transportation?
I could ask a question. Yeah. So, I'm wondering if Issaquah has done their building assessment yet about,
For city buildings?
yeah.
It is planned,
You'll hear
possibly
a
going
lot
under
more.
contract.
Yeah, you'll hear that. I'll be presenting next month, kind of on where all of that is at, and
Awesome.
it is not started yet, but there's been a lot of.
And I probably said this before, but something to think about. So, so Issaquah has a lot of buildings. And so I think to think about, are we utilizing all the space in all the buildings, all the time? And which buildings, what might we be able to let go of? And if we let go of those buildings, how much are we reducing our carbon footprint? How much money are we saving? And how much money are we gaining that we can potentially then put to retrofit up the other buildings that we have? Great. I've probably said it before, but sometimes I just like to repeat myself.
No, that's great. And I think David's going to give a quick preview at the end of this meeting about what we'll hear about. Okay. Any feedback on green space, tree canopy, sensitive ecosystems? Again, I'd lump these, they show up separately in the policies, but just for discussion.
Won't these overlap with those environmental policies though that we're talking about? So, I mean, that's what troubled me is these are environmental policies. They are not necessarily, I mean, the fire is climate, but most of these, as I read them, are environmental policies.
Yeah, and that's where I think staff will need to look at what policies live throughout the comprehensive plan that are gonna come into this new element? How do they mesh with these proposed policies and requirements from the state? So that there's a lot of work to do to consolidate where appropriate, but and also.
So do you really want our comments on this, or are we waiting for the environmental piece, or how's that gonna come together?
I think we want, these policies are really informed by the vulnerability assessment as well as the state requirements for mitigation and resilience. So I think if you do have feedback, since we haven't brought those other policies to you yet, that would be great to have.
Gotcha.
I would love to direct my comments then on this section specifically to talking about tree canopy. One of the benefits of just coming off of Title 18 is that we did some work on our code for tree canopy. And a big part of that we saw is that we are in trouble with how we define our trees, right? We don't have a good definition. If you follow the defining of trees, you would know that President Biden has directed the feds to be able to actually say, what is this? Because nobody seems to be able to say, what is a heritage tree? How is it that we need to do? We know we need protections, and what does that look like? So rather than waiting to be told, we need to have Issaquah have policies in place that actually be able to define when are you able to clear cut old growth trees to put in solar panels, for instance, right? Maybe not all properties are meant to have all features at one time, right? And how do we balance those things? Policy needs to help guide this discussion in a way that we haven't been able to on the code side with tree canopy, because we have tree canopy goals, right? We increased it by a couple % recently. That's nice. How do we measure trees? How do we be able to say the difference between being able to plant a tree, what it is now, what it's expected to be in 20 years, as we have issues with our climate resiliency? How is the fate of that tree going to be? And then how do we count that in our canopy? There's a lot of nuance to trees that if you haven't dived in, boy, is it fun. And I think that this is a great example of where our policy can start to get a lot more fine tooth and be able to direct where as a community are we going to be putting in policy protections for something that we know is so highly valued within our community. I'm going to give a direct example for this that I will say as a personal push is to say that I believe that this board should talk about things that's a drastic, like banning lawns, right? There's the idea in a lot of communities, it's already happened, to basically grandfather in existing lawns, no new development of lawns, right? We know they're a huge resource issue. They dump chemicals into our environment. There's really not a lot of positives. They're also terrible for fire breaks, right? Moss, sedums, and succulents are much better fire breaks as well. So there needs to be policies that actually address, hey, we have these issues that are grandstanding. What are a new way of thinking about things that right now we're not able to do because we don't have the policies in place? And I think that there's a robust discussion to be had about how we move forward of saying new development needs to have a different standard and a new operating manual.
And I can't remember if is that still from a previous comment, or was that?
I'm not sure if the fire preventiveness is in this category or not, but I just really liked seeing all of the new fire education and prevention
Throughout a lot of different.
Yeah. Much appreciated.
A lot of that was based on feedback from the board at a previous meeting.
Awesome.
Stacey, I have one comment, and it's not actually specific to this section, but it's just an observation from, I think, how this conversation, we'll go to Alex after me. This does kind of go back to our feedback that we provided, the comp plan initial kind of frame up, which is how are we thinking about natural environment topics versus climate? And we're talking about climate, and I don't know if that's intentional to separate the two, but like, it does feel like we either need to figure out the boundaries of the two or combine them in a way that Nancy doesn't feel like she's not sure what the bounds of what we're talking about are. So I think that's something, and I don't know, I think that obviously there's a huge topic area there, but I do think this gets back to what the board's feedback was, which is we feel uncomfortable with some things kind of being at odds within those two different topics. And then we're also discussing them separately. So I think making a decision and really figuring out, it doesn't make sense for those to be the same. Well, that's more criteria, I think, where they were combined, but how should this really live, and taking a step back and thinking about how climate and natural environment topics kind of come together in the comp plan feels like a conversation like in itself that we may want to have.
It also has to be intertwined. Isn't it all intertwined though?
Yeah, but if you have them separate, they're not separate topics. I agree with you. They're not. So they have to be together. But this isn't the complete environmental package either. So that's the problem. It's only a small piece of it that needs to be addressed.
I see.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think there was some interest in having this discussed separately, but I see that and we're really trying to go in with these policies with the climate lens. So if we're looking at trees, we're thinking about trees from the mitigation aspect, or even removal of trees for the fire aspect. But I think that's something we can talk with Stephen about for that conversation when he's here. Making it a bigger conversation when we're looking at all of these as a package and how that works.
I know Alex to go next, but I guess I just wanted, since we're having this, sorry, Alex, just one sec. You know, we really had pretty good dialogues when we talked about Title 18, and it had a pretty good structure in terms of topics. And perhaps going back and looking at those topics and how these would fit into that would help us, instead of having us talk about climate, because we really focused on those areas. I'm just trying to think of a better way to do this.
Shout out if you haven't read the comp plan, that's a good place to start.
All right, Alex, go ahead.
I think my comments are just going to be more additive to everything that you've said, in that, like, in this section, it calls out a lot of forests and things, but you're missing like wetland areas and riparian areas specifically called out as climate resilience adaptations and things like that, and really having the city focus on. Even the other thing I see missing is just working with private landowners in this section, or encouraging private landowners to improve habitat on their land. It seems like it's focused entirely on city properties or public properties. And so there needs to really be more integration with how the city works with its community members too on some of these topics.
Yeah, and I think some of this conversation was kind of testing out how this would work to have it as a separate conversation. It sounds like maybe we're coming back more to the integrated one. So I think we'll knowing that we need many more conversations, strategize with Stephen on how to move that forward.
Yeah, and to Nancy's point, I do think Title 18, there would be a topic that could be covered in different sections, but so there might be an environmental, there might be a climate section, but then tree canopy might be covered differently in climate than it's covered in natural environment. So I do think the Title 18 did a pretty good job. There was times but generally, even when there was topics that cross multiple categories, that was clear and it was done together, even if they are entirely different topics within the broader comp plan. So I don't think it necessarily means they have to be combined, but doing them one at a time is different.
I like the tiered system, prioritizing and the color coding. For me, that worked really well, although I'm not colorblind. There was one thing on page 6. Warmer temperatures and heat waves, and that would affect the built environment, the natural systems. But for some reason, water it doesn't affect water resources. It doesn't have one for water resources. And I'm wondering if it should, because with warmer temperatures and heat waves, water resources could get diminished. Although it is under droughts, so maybe that's why.
Are you thinking particularly around water supply impact or?
Both water supply and then also with lakes and ponds
Okay.
and streams, if that water resource is the same, it can affect everyone living in the water.
Raj, I just wanted to check. I saw your hand go up for a second. Did you have a comment?
No, sorry. That was whatever I wanted to say actually did get covered by most of the people talked now. So I'm good. Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Jen.
Thank you. So water, I think this is actually one of the more problematic sections in the document in that it needs more coverage policy wise. For instance, on page 101, I think would be a great place to talk about CARA, right, our groundwater recharge areas as needing to be further monitored, right? We did a nice, amazing update of CARA in Title 18, and it's something that needs to not go away as we did it and checked off the list. We know that with a changing environment right now, that the most likely what's going to end up happening is we're going to be tapping into our groundwater to a much higher degree, right? When you start having a change in precipitation and in the water cycle, as we know is happening. Right now, from a policy perspective, we don't have a water issue because we buy in water from the Cascade Water Alliance. From an environmental perspective, we have a huge water issue in that we have way more consumption than we're possibly able to hold. So while we have been able to compensate and deal with that, we still have massive issues when we think about storage, when we think about self-resilience. So policies that still need to be developed to address those things. Specifically too, to be able to talk about, I know that you mentioned that there was some classifications and right now it's put down to low on the sewer and septic. Actually, when we were, as we've been talking about the surface water, stormwater, and wastewater master plans that is severely outdated, needing to be addressed, right? So I was kind of surprised that our policies were a little bit light in that area and that they were classified as they were. We know that we have septic systems that are aging and vulnerable to flooding. So I would have, and again, I didn't see the assessment. I would love to have the assessment, right, to be able to better understand, but I would have changed some of those designations a little bit just based on the knowledge that I've been lucky enough to be able to have from working with our water department and the things that they've told us about what we need to prepare for. So I think it's really interesting when we talk about being able to protect, like Alex called out, I think there needs to be specific language that talks specifically about our protection of bogs and wetlands. And what we know specifically from staff is that when we were addressing Title 18, we were able to extend the buffers for Bill 2 when we were talking about different waterways. However, that is based on some outdated information that is the best that we can do right now. And through discussions with Minnie and with Doug Yormick, what we found is that actually we're operating on what we think is the best available science, but we actually have been able to dedicate resources in the city to be able to better understand the impact of our build 2 with our various waterways. And so that there's actually funding that needs to happen by council for the administration to be able to better manage this, which means that we need policies in place to be able to support that. And so again, bogs and wetlands being called out so that we have a better understanding of how we're impacting water. I appreciate it on a policy perspective.
Well said.
It was a lot.
And we'll have our water team here next month to talk about the water master plan updates. Okay. Great, we have about 5 minutes left, so I might just jump over to again, we mushed these: public health, social services, emergency services. And then the last one we'll touch on is local regional economy and growth.
Nancy?
So I just have a general question. You know, the legislature passed a piece of legislation that said single-family lots could now have 4 units per lot, something like that, along that. So will the comp plan address that? And then will the trickle down of the impacts on water supply, wastewater and all that also have to be addressed?
My understanding is that applies to communities over 75,000. Jory might know
Yeah.
better.
I say I didn't know that. I thought it affected us. Okay.
Not the same way that it will affect Seattle.
Bellevue.
Yeah, and neighbors might be a better way to put it. So from my understanding, we don't need to do any updates, but we do need to be vigilant about how neighboring communities are impacted and be able to kind of better understand, because it will be a good understanding of how we want to address the missing middle, right? And so that all kind of ties in, but right now I think we're in a wait.
I didn't know that, so thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
And HOAs are exempt.
Maybe the whole city should be an HOA.
It does talk about in here, there's some like, encourage local, encourage to talk to like the community about this. And I'm just wondering if education, to me, it always comes back to education. Like we talk about these like big topics that I don't think most people understand. And most people are the people that this applies to. So like, does education need to actually be a separate called out? Like, how are we going? Like, for example, talking about, we shouldn't have lots, right? Like, those of us who are in this role, like, oh yeah, that makes total sense, but good luck getting everybody behind you on that. So like, do we need to actually say somewhere in here, like, that we're gonna actually put some, energy into not just like on each of these topics, we're gonna do a little marketing and we're gonna teach people about this, but like, what does it actually look like if we want to really teach our community about why this is important? Maybe, I don't know what that looks like, but it might be an interesting thing to think about.
If you don't mind me piggybacking on Dixie's comment, what I have is policies to increase community engagement with neighborhoods directly for individual neighborhoods to better thrive and adapt. So right now that might be having a policy that says we need to have neighborhood liaisons, right? We have had programs in the past that for some reason haven't been able to be funded and be able to be staffed, and so they've gone to the wayside. And really, we know that one of the greatest ways to be able to do education and to be able to have more community involvement is to actually interact in our community, right? So this is one wonderful space as our boards and commissions for the community to come. And having policies that help support giving avenues for the public to be able to engage in their own government is a fantastic policy to have.
Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, just to add the couple of comments before Stacey, I was thinking about it when Nancy was talking about it earlier as well. I think one way, and I'm not sure if this is the document, but one way to, increase that outreach or, have the neighborhoods, communities, local businesses involved in it is actually providing sustainability or carbon incentives or, some kind of that for the businesses or neighborhoods or residents where you say the more you adapt some sustainability goals, reduce your energy consumption, reduce your greenhouse gas consumption, do more sustainable practices, and there could be some language. I don't know if this is the place to do it, but that policy or code could be built by the city, which actually provides some carbon incentives or sustainability incentives for the local businesses as well as the residents. And specifically going back, I think Nancy had brought this up or Anne had brought this up about including the businesses, the bigger businesses, asking them to chip in. And I think that's where the carbon incentives or specific goals would be really useful. And the businesses can do that, you know, they will play a huge part of it, and the city can provide them incentives in some ways where they are required or motivated to do that.
Right, and I think with that, we're at the end of the time we had for this. Just to end on a high note, I love seeing the recycling compost mandate. So that was great to see in there. So I think if there's any other follow-ups, these topics will be coming back. And obviously, if there's any comments that you have that you'd like to get into Stacy's hands before then, email would be the best option for that. But it sounds like we will have the opportunity to talk about this in more detail. So follow up on that.
Great. Yeah, I think Jamie and I are checking in tomorrow, so we can talk about next steps, and then we'll circle around with our comprehensive plan team and figure out how to move this forward. The very least at the August conversation, we can discuss if we need to do some kind of working meeting or special meeting, although I try to commit not to having many more of those with the board since you had quite a few this spring. So, great. Well, I think that's really our next step. Take this initial feedback, and then we'll come back to you with our plan for engagement going forward. I'll try and email that out to the group ahead of our July meeting.
It's so good to see all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a lot of work gone into it.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'll pass that on. Our consultant team essentially finishes up tomorrow. So I will. As well. Great.
All right, well, I think with that, we have wrapped up our regular agenda items, and we'll move on to reports. First one being lead for cities certification.
Great. So within the packet, there is just a brief report around our lead for cities. I think many of you had a chance to meet Billy Almanza, the intern. That is something he'd really been working on for the last year. We participate in this cohort of 15 cities from across the country over the last year to submit our application to become a LEED certified city. It looks across our entire city, from access to green space to quality of life, our water system, waste management system. And we were certified gold a few weeks ago. We haven't done any public announcement yet about it. We're planning on doing a big event July 24th, I believe is the date. You'll receive an invitation to that in the coming weeks, and then we'll do a lot of publicity, public announcement coming out of that event. So it's a great kind of report card on where the city is, and I think a lot of the value that we saw going through the process this last year was to see how we compare with other communities where we're doing well, but also to identify some of the gaps. So David and I met with the city administrator just a week or two ago to talk about where we didn't score as strongly and where we could make some improvements, and are already working on a couple of the near-term actions. But are excited that we reached gold. We are actually really close to platinum. So we'll continue moving forward some of the areas where we had gaps, and look forward to celebrating with you all and other members of the community next month. Great. And then I think David, we didn't talk before, I think was going to provide just a couple updates on some items he's working on, and something he'll be bringing to you all next month.
Yeah, I can just do quick updates and let me know if I did forget anything. But next month, I will bring back something that I briefly touched base with everyone on earlier this spring, which was the decarbonization resolution for City Council to consider. And thinking about some of the comments that we received when we first mentioned it, I thought I would come back with kind of putting this decarbonization resolution that we're considering within the context of all the other facilities work that we are doing, because there's a lot of work that our facilities team is doing in coordination with us. So hopefully the plan is to give kind of an overview of the different assessments and efforts around taking a hard look at our facilities and trying to think about how our built environments, our buildings in the built environment have an impact on climate, and seeing how all of these different pieces kind of work together. So I will be coming back with more of a presentation next month on that. And then we will also be kind of diving into that decarbonization resolution and asking for thoughts, comments, and eventually some thoughts for council to consider.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that'll be one of our topics for July, and then the other one, Matt Ellis and team will be here to talk about the sewer master plan update. Will be our major topics for July.
Awesome.
Right, any other business?
Are we on track for the tour tomorrow?
Yes, yeah, for those that can make the Recology tour, I believe it starts at noon. If anybody was interested in carpooling, I did send out an email about that. We're gonna meet at Tibbetts Valley Park. I know Janet, you were interested. I think Raj isn't able to come anymore. Okay, okay, great. So it might be a small.
I'm interested in carpooling.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to drive. Yes.
I think I had suggested Tibbetts Valley.
Yes,
Park,
yeah, I was
skate
just
park
looking at the
at,
email here. Tibbetts Valley, right by the skate park.
At 11:20.
11:20.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's about a 30-minute drive. to the site. Great, yeah, we may have some other staff joining us, and then I believe Mina, somebody may have met at the Sustainability Fair. She's a Gibson X student. She's planning to join us as well. She's been interning with us for the last year, so if you haven't had a chance to meet her, that'll be a great opportunity. But I think it'll be a pretty small group. So if folks weren't able to make Cedar Grove or can't make it tomorrow, those invitations are pretty open. We can schedule some other time. I know it's in the middle of the workday, middle of the school day, so we can look at some other, if there's some flexible times, if folks are interested in doing those again.
Shall we bring all our recyclable material? Challenge their system.
Just kind of
Plastic
strap
bag.
it on
Toss
top of
it
the
in,
car.
see what happens.
All right, I think unless,
My name's Jonathan Smith. Can I make a brief announcement about my July event?
Leave that up to our chair.
go ahead.
Okay, my name's Jonathan Smith. I'm a visitor here tonight. I run a monthly litter cleanup program. Our next event is the first Saturday of July. We will meet at, I think that's the first. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I think it's July 1st Saturday. We'll meet at 9 o'clock at the post office. This is not associated with the city at all. It's just a volunteer event. We've been doing it for 20 months now. Last month we had 20 volunteers show up, and anybody that would like to come, we would appreciate volunteers. Thanks.
Great.
Do you get a lot of garbage? Is there a lot to pick up?
Yes, we do. We pick up garbage for approximately an hour and a half. If you consider one and a half trash bags per person, that would be what, 35 bags of trash last month.
What kind of stuff are people, you find?
The vast majority of litter that you find is single-use drink containers, coffee cups, beer cans, and drink cans, and plastic bottles. That's the vast majority of what we pick up.
And how is the best way for people to connect with you in the event?
I post on Nextdoor as well as Facebook. I just recently started a Facebook group called Issaquah Volunteer Cleanup. And our tagline is "Love Where You Live." And it's a picture from Poople Point looking down into the city.
I can send out information to the board. And John was one of the city environmental award winners along with Anne this spring.
We're grateful for your work.
It's been really fun. It's amazing when you spend a day out picking up litter at a trailhead or picking up litter out of Issaquah Creek or along Gilman Boulevard or pulling a shopping cart out of the ditch in front of Target. It feels good.
That, all that debris that doesn't get into the waterways is super important.
Does the city ever advertise this on its newsletter at all?
I know John's had some conversations with staff. I think we have to there was some liability concerns, so they've tried to do some promotion or support John in some ways.
We do support, we've got bags, we get a big pile somewhere, but it's not for us, but it's pretty much just a grassroots. Cool. Try to keep it simple.
Thank you, John. Well, I think we are adjourned, as I don't think we have any other items. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, Alex, Josh, Ashwin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to meet you, Alex.
Joy, where do you